And I'm back. Welcome to another episode of Becoming a Techno Wizard. And today we're continuing our series on my newsletter, reading about new story of humanity and how hierarchy is at the foundation, at the core of all of our problems in society. And today I'm getting to part 26. We're almost done with this, y'all. Talking about how to cure the cancer of hierarchy. So if you recalled in the last section, I talked about how hierarchy is natural, just like a cancer. And because of that, you can't, sit back and say, oh, if humans didn't exist, the world would be better, or if we all die off, we'll be better for nature, or whatever, right? Like, no, that's not how it works. You can see hierarchy happening in almost every other species. In many other species, you see the same problem. Not because hierarchy is like the best either, right? Because that's the other side of it. Could be people think, oh, hierarchy is winning out, capitalism is winning out, blah, blah, blah. So therefore, it should be good. But no, again, you can see parasites, you can see disease, you can see, like I said, in this example, cancer can win out against their hosts, right? That's why they're still here, is because they're very successful at what they do. But we don't root for cancer. We don't root for diseases. We don't root for parasites to win, right? And likewise, for humans, we aren't necessarily parasites just because we fell prey to this disease, to this cancer, right? So you have to divorce these things. You have to be more critical, more nuanced with all this stuff. And so what I'm suggesting here is that hierarchy is a cancer. And yes, it is very successful, but we should not root for that. We as humans can change. We can be different. We can cure ourselves of this cancer, and is in the best interest of life on earth, and I would even maybe even venture the universe, right, that we survive, because we need to pass on these lessons, right? We need to show the other life forms, the other intelligence, whatever, that this is not a good route to go down, right? And so if we learn from these mistakes, if we learn from this cancer, right, if we learn from this stuff, if we cure these diseases, we can help all these other species, we can help all these other things that may come after us to realize that, hey, this is the problem, this is how you deal with it, so on and so forth. So yeah, that's my argument there. And now I'm going to get into how we can go about that, right? How we can begin to cure that cancer of hierarchy. So let's get into it. Now here's a transition to the solutions if you haven't felt this coming already. Current and past treatments of this problem are very much like how we treat cancer up to this point. We nuke everything and hope the cancerous cells die before the healthy ones. Wait, did I read this already? Oh, yes, I did read this. Whoop- Whoops. Um, so yeah, I did read that part. I remember reading that part. So now I was looking at, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So if I said the last section, I ended it with, so if you got this far, let's finally look into how we can use those wisdoms of indigenous peoples, because I used some examples of what indigenous peoples um, did to combat hierarchy. Because what we missing from our current story of society is that, oh, that was weird. I don't know if you noticed, it was a big kind of like blacked out for a second, but yeah, what people don't realize is that many people have this Hobbesian, Rousseauan, I don't know, view of humanity, that we kind of evolved in a linear manner culturally and socially. So our hierarchical society is more civilized, right? Is better than those barbarians and those cavemen and stuff like that that existed before. But in reality, when you look at the archaeological data, we actually see that many hunter-gatherer cultures were very complex, right, in their social behaviors, right, in how they designed their societies. They were very intentional with it. There were a lot of nuances where some hunter-gatherer societies were hierarchical, but others were egalitarian, and those egalitarian ones actively practiced um, anti-hierarchical practice. I forgot the term. Reverse dominance tactics. There we go. Counter dominance or reverse dominance tactics, right? They practice these things actively, and they also had a passive environmental kind of um, context that made it easier to have that egalitarian culture. So I outlined some of these last time, and that shows us how we can begin to cure that cancer. So now I want to talk about the future, right? How can we take this into the future? So let's start with this section. Starting from scratch now. I actually need to update this. need to update my last thing because I guess I did two parts together. Maybe this is part 27. I don't know. I'm all over the place. So sorry, y'all. But yeah, I think the first important point is to note that we are not and cannot start from scratch. This is not some blue sky, greenfield daydream about what if we just started over. We can never start over. Even if we get to a new planet, we'll still be bringing all of our history and assumptions and values and so on with us. Mars. In fact, you can very clearly see this in the language of space sci fi and current day burgeoning space industry. We say we are colonizing another planet or even space itself. This is already starting off on the wrong foot. And I myself still use these terms of, oh, yeah, I want to go colonize space. I want to go explore space, right? Because it's deep in our culture, right? To think like this, to talk like this. And so we have to be more critical, right? I say that you word a lot, but we have to be more aware, self-aware of what we're saying and how we're thinking. Furthermore, even if we do start over, how will you do so? What will you have learned? I can tell you right now, most people just assume that they could do better if they were in charge or if folks just did it this way instead of that way. This is wrong. This is inherently egocentric. This is why, like, doesn't matter how good of a person you are, if you're in a position of power, you will inevitably, right, misuse that power, even if you have the best intentions ever, because we just don't know what the right way is, the right way, right? And it's completely contingent upon the environment and context and all this other stuff, and who you're even helping, who's right for what's right for who. Let's continue. The truth is that we have very little idea what will work and what wouldn't work in any new environment. All we know is that is what has not worked in past environments, and we barely even know that. If we try to build a society from the top down, we are already missing the point. The most resilient and adaptive societies are those in which everyone has the most personal freedoms. They're built bottom up. If we try to build a system, whether it's from scratch or as an incremental change from the current ones, that tells people what they can and can't do, we have already built the carcinogenous seeds of a hierarchical power structure. This is why socialism, like when, especially government backed socialism, whatever, is very, very dangerous because you're still using this hierarchical power of the government, right, to maintain this equality, and that's inherently problematic. That's just going to lead us down the same path. Instead, we have to figure out how to empower every individual to have the most say in their own lives with as little coercive power on other people's lives, directly or indirectly, as possible. Next, we have to realize that we are part of nature. So let me take some time just real quick, because this part is super important, right? People like to say, "Oh, people can't be left alone, or else they'll do this. They're gonna go murder people. Who's to stop? What's to stop them from murdering people, right? Blah blah blah." This is why I spent the beginning of this section talking about human nature, because if you have the wrong assumptions about human nature, then you're going to make those inevitable arguments. Oh, we can't leave people. We need laws and government because people are just going to be bad. Like, no. When we look at archaeology, psychology, the human mind, history, we see that that is not how humans work, right? We behave based on the environment. So if you create an environment where people can get into a place of power or people can use some sort of power to do bad things and get away with it, that's when you have all these negative consequences. That's when you have all these criminals and killers and all this other stuff that we have today. When you look at these other cultures who had egalitarian relationships and societies where there was very little coercive power, you didn't see that crime. You didn't see stealing. You didn't see murder. You didn't see, whatever else, crimes that we have today. Granted, I'm talking about crimes in the loose sense, not in terms of, oh, you broke this law, whatever. Um, and furthermore, they earlier they used that they were better with it, right? Like if somebody did do something wrong, it was dependent on that community, right? To decide, was this wrong? How was it wrong? why was this wrong, and what do we do about it, right? As a community, they can decide. Just like if your friend does you wrong, you're gonna sit down and if you actually care about them, right? If you feel like you still want to be friends, you're gonna sit down and talk about it. You're gonna figure out why they did that, what's going on, how can you help? You're gonna be more human about it versus what we have today, where it's just basically automated our entire moral system to this thing called a legal system and laws and stuff like that, right? So yeah, this is all to say that this is why it's so important to build a society that's flat as possible, right? Where yeah, I don't have power over what you do, and you don't have power over what I do, right? If we can build that society, if we can, take down these coercive structures, then we can have people actually embrace their potential, right? We can have this idyllic society that we don't think is possible when it really is. So let's continue. Next, we have to realize that we are part of nature. We are not above it. We are not separate from it or anything else. We are another creature on this earth in this universe. We are therefore beholden to the same conditions and laws as far as we understand them, physical laws, laws of physics, and all this other stuff, and so on. Yes, we have the ability to change those conditions and bend or at least learn those laws. We are not above them. Being blind to the conditions which influence behaviors does not make us immune to those conditions. It just makes us ignorant of their influence. Another important aspect here, right? And I get into this whole thing about free will. Go check out my podcast. I'll link the specific episode in the description, but I had an entire like almost 2 hour podcast talking about why free will is an illusion and a very destructive one at that. It basically centers around this idea here that we assume that we are, that agency and choice means that we, are basically making choices at random. We can just do whatever we want there, but in reality we are influenced just like an animal, any other animal, right? We are influenced by the environment, and furthermore by many environments, not just the physical ones but the social ones, the ones in our minds, right? We're affected by all these environments in which, prods us towards this direction or another direction, and the choices that we make are a part of the system, right? That is us, and the system is like millions of other systems, right? Your cells, your organs, your neurochemistry, your cultural background, all these different things are different systems with different payoffs and all this other. It's extremely complicated, right? So it makes sense why we came up with free will. But this is one of the things I mean. Like if you think that you're making a choice between A and B, but you don't realize that you have 100 or even 1,000 different, influences upon which choice that you're going to make, then you're not gonna realize that by you choosing B, you're actually in reflecting, right, those influences, those 100, 1,000 different influences. And just because you are ignorant of those influences doesn't mean that they are not acting upon you, right? So that's something we really have to, realize as a society and as individuals. Anyways, further, we have to erect a very strong immune system to ego. We have to actively and passively disincentivize any collection or abuse of power. We have to realize that no good leader or talented individual or even a technological progress is worth the cost of our very existence, right? This is talking to those cult of personality people that say, "Oh, this person is great, let's follow him," right? Or those people that says, "Oh, accelerationists, let's go right into the singularity and let them figure it out," whatever. Like, no, it doesn't matter how good this person is, or how smart this person seems to be, or how awesome this technology is. If we don't solve these problems of ego and hierarchy and enabling each person to have their most potential and moving this course of power back, then we're going to come against the same problems. And if it's probably going to be even worse, like what we see with technology. Like we have now the technology to completely wipe us out. If somebody pressed those buttons, those nuclear buttons, we're all gone. All right, and then what? Right, then who cares about our technological progress? So we have to be very careful. We can't just go gung ho into technology. And I say that as a techno wizard, as a person who wants technology, that is indistinguishable from magic. Like that's my goal. I want to build technology like that, but we can't just run into it, right? We have to study. We have to take our time and figure out, all of the various complexities and environments and all this other stuff that allows us to develop this technology and the consequences that might come from it, right? If we don't figure that out, we goners, right? So that's why I mentioned that there. Any reason we might come up with to justify the extended use of hierarchical power is inevitably a carcinogen that will corrupt that power into something awful sooner than later. Let's try to keep the empire building of the future to fiction. All right. And even then, we need to start being more explorative with the types of fiction because almost every fiction out there is hierarchical in some instance. Like it has this, assumption of empires for fantasy, kingdoms and empires for fantasy, or empires and governments and big governments and stuff like that for future, when in reality our history is absolutely full of anarchic communities that we just ignore, we just assumed it didn't exist, right? So how about we make some more fiction, some fiction period that has, anarchy stuff that's talking about anarchic, societies and communities en masse at scale, right? What does that look like? How do they function? How is life in those communities, right? Let's have more stories like that. But anyways, sure, there are benefits to building empires, or at least to creating permanent hierarchies. But those benefits probably always come at the cost of sustainable growth later on. It seems to be a physical, like, constraint. Like, it seems to be almost like a law of physics. Like, I want to create, I'll talk about it later. I'll talk about it because I'm talking too much. And maybe faster at first to have someone in charge instead of a consensus-based system to get things done. But there's a very short half-life to having specific people who are always in charge. Regardless of if the people in charge are voted in, earn it by merit, or are divined by the gods, it inevitably is just not able to adapt to changing environments and conditions over an extended period of time, and those positions quickly become sought after for their power rather than their responsibility. We see that all throughout history, right? Anytime you have a good leader, the next generation or a few generations after that, the entire empire goes gone. Like it's it's inevitable. It really is. Um, and I want to put together a whole, kind of scientific principle on this thing, and like after I, do more study on this stuff, because it seems to be like serious. Like every example we have in history, we have we see this pattern. So why haven't we, visualized this? Why haven't we talked about this? Why haven't we put this out as a more of a thing to look out for? But anyways, yeah, that's my thing on why we actually can't start from scratch, and what we can be doing instead. And I'm going to continue next episode talking about the problem with democracy. That word we swear is the best thing ever here in America and many other places in the world. We say democracy, democracy, right? Even many leftists think that democracy is the end all be all, but it ain't. All right. So yeah, thanks as always for watching, for listening. Let me know your thoughts. If you want to have a conversation about this stuff, I'm always open to doing so. And yeah, thanks for everything. Have a great one.